The following episode contains disturbing material that might be inappropriate for some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised.
In tonight's episode of Real Twisted Tales,
I am going to tell you the story of Josef Mengele, or as we now know him to be, the Angel of Death. During the final years of the Second World War, he committed crimes that were so horrific, so difficult to believe, that I had a really hard time writing this episode. In fact, right up until sitting here to film this, I wasn't sure I was going to be able to do it. Here at Real Twisted Tales, we research a lot of true crime stories to ensure that the ones that we bring to you are original, engaging and thought-provoking. And as a team, we all connect with the people and the victims in each story. However, this one brought tears to my eyes and a sickness to my stomach. What Mengele did, we felt compelled to tell you so we can make sure nothing like this can happen again. In order to tell this story, we need to go back, way back to post-First World War Germany, where young Josef Mengele was growing up. He should have followed in his father's footsteps and taken over the family business, a huge agricultural machinery empire that was one of the largest in Europe. But as Germany was finding its feet after the First World War with the rise of the Nazi Party, Mengele decided he wanted to go into medicine. Of course, being a noble profession, his family backed his decision and helped him earn a PhD in anthropology in 1935. His focus of study, in its simplest terms, meant Mengele was a doctor of what makes us human on a genetic level. Alongside his studies, the Nazi Party grew in strength, and their ideology impressed Mengele. In particular, their views on Germany being an Aryan race. And so in 1937, Mengele joined the SS. In 1939, the world plunged into the Second Great War. Now I could sit here and tell you about the work Mengele did during the war, and during those first years where he was in the field of battle as a doctor and a soldier. But quite frankly, I don't feel this man should be made to look like a hero of any kind. I will say, Mengele did his part, and no doubt saved many lives between 1939 and 1943. And at the end of that time, he was a captain in the army with medals on his chest. But what he did in 1943, 44 and 45 still makes him the very definition of evil. In 1943, after getting injured on the battlefield, Mengele saw his opportunity to further both his career within the Nazi Party and as an anthropologist, because he discovered the concentration camps. One in particular caught his attention the most, one that the world would eventually find out about in all of its horrific detail: Auschwitz. Mengele wanted to be posted there because he knew what was happening in the camp, and it presented, and I'm quoting here, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for him to study humans in any way he saw fit. And to give you an idea of Mengele's warped mind, on his first day, while dressed in his immaculate white doctor's jacket, innocent people who were being condemned for their religion, race or disability got off a train and lined up in front of him while he smoked, whistled and hummed happy songs. As each person approached, he flicked his hand left or right. Left, they lived, and right, they died. As simple as a flick of the hand, and he didn't even bat an eyelid. And no one was safe, not even young children. And I found this disturbing. And for me, it was even more disturbing when I discovered he had a child of his own at home. And I just can't understand how a parent could condemn children to death whilst whistling and humming to themselves. His first day alone, 1,035 people were executed because of him. And to put that into context, that's around as many people as you would find in a large secondary school here in the UK. Pre-war, Mengele was obsessed with one particular element of anthropology: twins. He was fascinated with how they came to be, how much they were truly alike on an anatomic level. And as said, Auschwitz presented Mengele with a cruel and twisted opportunity to experiment on any twins that came through. He was convinced that if he could find a way for women to conceive twins every time, he would aid the Nazi Party and its principles and help Aryan women double the purebred population. In 1944, less than a year after joining the camp, Mengele was promoted to first physician. He was beginning to climb to the top tier of the Nazi Party and no doubt had eyes on one day becoming one of Hitler's infamous 12 generals. Without a moral compass guiding him, or anyone employed at the concentration camp, and with him being the senior doctor, Mengele descended into absolute barbarism. And this is where I begin to struggle with this story. The things he did, the innocent people he killed, makes him one of the most prolific serial killers in history. Mengele performed the removal of hearts and stomachs without anaesthetic, and one survivor, Yitzhak Ganon, had his kidney removed without any pain relief, and then was sent back to work immediately after. The list of Mengele's crimes is so long, I don't have the time to be able to tell you them all, so I'm going to focus on just a few experiments Mengele conducted that haunted me the most in our next chapter. I hope you're ready. Alongside other experiments he conducted on the innocent people of Auschwitz, Mengele conducted the twin separation experiment. He would take identical twins, separate them, and begin to slowly kill one of them. He would torture, poison, starve them, promise that they would see their twins soon, only to never bring them together. And over a few weeks, they would painfully die as their vital organs slowly failed. And in their final moments, they would know that the promise of seeing their twin, their family, their hope, wasn't going to happen. Then, as the first twin succumbed to their inhumane treatment, he went to the second twin, who was not subjected to such atrocities and was waiting in a nice environment. Mengele would tell them it was time to reconnect with their family, and filled with joy, they would walk with him hand in hand to the room where their dead sibling lay. Then once the living twin had seen their starved, decaying, mutilated body, once the horror of losing their loved one had sunk in, he would have them shot. Just imagine being that twin, filled with hope, only to have it extinguished like a candle in a hurricane. It's barbaric, sadistic, and one of the cruelest things anyone could do. But Mengele wanted them to die at the same time, with their cause of death being completely different, just so he could perform an autopsy on them to see how different the twins now were on an anatomic level. But before any of his atrocious experiments, the twins were given preferential treatment by Mengele. They had better accommodation, more food, right up until he was ready to torture them. Before he became a monster, Mengele was charming to the children. They called him uncle. He gave them sweets, took an interest in their lives. But behind where he charmed and entertained them, the smoke bellowed into the sky from the furnaces where bodies were burned. He made them laugh, made them feel safe, knowing within hours or days he would be sending them to burn there too. Mengele experimented on around 1,500 pairs of twins. Less than 100 survived their touch with the angel of death. And as more time passed, Mengele descended into insanity, and it was noted that he was one of the few SS soldiers stationed at Auschwitz who didn't need to be on drugs or alcohol to continue with the daily massacres. He loved what he was doing and why he was doing it. Even after a year there, even after being solely responsible for tens, if not hundreds of thousands of deaths, he still wore his immaculate white coat, still whistled while he worked, still hummed happy songs as he watched people die. And as I said earlier, I'm not going to delve into the details of Mengele and what he did. It would be too hard to tell you in our short time, and it would have been too difficult for me to write. But I feel for us to truly understand how evil this man was, I do need to talk about the conjoining experiments. This is difficult for me. I'm a father myself, and the idea of what Mengele did to children in particular, I just can't get my head around. Mengele somehow convinced himself that he could surgically join twins together. I don't know what he hoped to achieve by doing so. I don't know why someone didn't try to stop him. But in late 1944 and early 1945, he began cutting open the flesh of children and stitching them together. They would then go back into the camp, where others would see and hear the poor children suffering. A survivor of the Holocaust, who was interviewed in 1978, said she often saw twins this way, and the sound of them crying in pain and the smell of their bodies as they decomposed whilst they were still alive was something she could never forget. Why he did it, only he will ever know. As the war began to end, Russian forces approached Auschwitz, and SS soldiers based there knew it was time to leave, but not before trying to kill every person imprisoned there. Before fleeing Auschwitz, as soldiers shot innocent people, Josef Mengele asked for a huge pit to be dug and a large fire started. And once it was raging, Mengele ordered every person he was experimenting on to be thrown in, while he stood and watched them burn. Mengele went on the run, but was quickly captured, and as with other SS soldiers, he knew he would be sentenced to death. But amongst the chaos of post-war Germany, Mengele managed to escape, and under a new name, he fled Europe for South America, settling in Argentina. Under his new identity, Mengele settled into a new life. He found a job as a carpenter and used his family's money to invest in businesses. He created a new life, one of wealth, of comfort, and of warmth. Josef Mengele literally got away with murder. And I don't know about you, but I find that incredibly unfair. However, death comes for us all, and despite being known as the Angel of Death, Josef Mengele was no exception. On February the 7th, 1979, a staggering 34 years after Mengele fled Auschwitz, death finally caught up with him. Whilst out on a quiet beach in Brazil, a beach he visited often with friends, Mengele decided to go for a swim. As he began to head out to sea, he felt a sudden sharp pain in his head, and he became paralysed down one side of his body. Knowing he was having a stroke, Mengele desperately tried to swim back to shore. He could see and hear his friends on the beach, laughing and joking in the warm South American sun, unaware that he was in trouble. They had their backs to him, oblivious that the cold was beginning to take hold in Mengele's bones. He fought to get back, dragging himself through the water with his one working arm, but the current was too strong and his body too weak. And looking up to see his friends who didn't know he was dying, Mengele began to drown. Now, I'm not one to wish harm on anyone, but Mengele is so close to being rescued by having people's backs turned on him, it feels right. For all those years before, he turned his back on the suffering he caused. He would have known he was dying, just like his victims. He would have been afraid, just like his victims. And I wonder, maybe in his final moments before the ocean swallowed him, The faces of every person he mutilated, tortured and killed was there, watching his fear, watching his pain. And maybe before he took his final breath, he truly understood what he had done to all those innocent people. And hopefully, their faces will haunt him forever. Hey everyone, thanks for watching our video, The Angel of Death. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing, and you'll be notified when we release new stories. It will really help us out. Good night everyone, and keep safe.
Coming up in the next episode of Real Twisted Tales.
We're going to the dark and unforgiving forests of Ukraine, where a young girl went missing, and like in Kipling's Jungle Book, she was raised by wolves.